day 3 of the Eurogamer Expo. Thank you all for coming to this developer session. I think it's going to be a pretty special one. It's an in-depth look at one of the most exciting games of 2013. And so without further ado, I will pass you on to Ubisoft Montreal's creative director, Jonathan Moran.
Hello, everyone. Are you having a nice show so far? Today I decided to do something a little special and different. Instead of showing a demo or something you already saw, I'm going to talk, and you'll see stuff in the background of the game, so don't be worried. But I'll talk a little bit more about where Watch Dogs has been born, how it's been created, and what's the foundation behind the game, and what we tried to achieve. Hopefully you're going to like this extra information, which is harder to pull off and pass into an interview or through a demo. So it's going to give you extra information on it. So without further ado, let's start, and we'll just kick in with a little video you might have just saw, just to put you back into the tone and universe of Watch Dogs, so I can use all my buzzwords without having anybody being lost. So let's start.
In the summer of 2003, the lights went out for 55 million Americans across the Northeast. Panic spread throughout New York State, injuring hundreds. 11 people died in the dark. What was to blame? A small vulnerability inside the state's transmission control room. Raymond Kenny, a disgruntled employee, unleashed a virus and walked away. Later, the system overloaded and the grid shut down. 10 years on, modern systems have advanced exponentially. 2011 marked the installation of America's first central operating system. CTOS is a computer software that manages entire cities, providing centralized control over subway lines, traffic lights, surveillance cameras, and electricity grids. A computer now controls a major city, but who controls the computer? The answer is private companies that have everything to gain from a CTOS. Personal data collection is the key commodity. You are no longer an individual. You are a data cluster bound to a vast global network. Last year, the average American cast a digital shadow of over 2.3 gigabytes. What does that represent? Of course, there are credit cards, medical records, and reading habits, but a CTOS includes much more. Massive data silos track and sort every moment of your digital life, revealing how you think and what you believe. That information could be turned against you, not just to sell products, but to influence your worldviews. CTOS directly links your personal information to the physical systems you use every day, essentially providing a direct line to your bedroom laptop. Because all data is interconnected, from Nigerian email scams to hardcore pornography, online shopping to emergency services. It's all part of the same network. 10 years ago, one man shut down the entire Northeast from a central control room. Today, everything can be hacked. No one knows what part of the system will be exploited, but everyone agrees the next assault will do more than just turn out the lights.
God, I've listened to that video way too much. Okay. It's been a really long time for me, and quite a few other people who worked on Watch Dogs since the beginning. Watch Dogs started almost 5 years ago. It's almost a generation back in the day, so it's unbelievably long. And when you're doing a project for so long, there's a lot of different layers that gets created. For example, when we started the project, some of you might know that, we were called Nexus. You always have to build some kind of code name to make sure that everybody understands who you are from the inside of Ubisoft world and all of that. We built a logo for it. It was inspired by a logo that means connectivity. And in the middle, we created a little gap to emphasize the hacking part, exploiting connectivity, if you want. Nexus means, if you are interested, a point in the middle of two connections within a network. So as you can see, we didn't really deviate that much in 5 years from the direction point. But as the game became and evolved towards the game that you guys know today as Watch Dogs, and that you're going to play soon, hopefully, then a lot of stuff happened. And this logo ended up here. So we kept it. and we've put it into Aiden's mask to signify what he's using as a major gameplay tool. There's a lot of stuff like that in Watch Dogs. A lot of things that we've built earlier on and decided to keep for adding layers and layers upon layers in the universe of the game, which I think gives an interesting flavor to it. Not everything is explained in the game, not everything is fully described, and it's voluntarily. It's just to make sure that when people play Watch Dogs, they can have a sense of wonder, something that helps them fill the gaps, and I think it's part of playing a game to create your own idea about it. It's not a big shock to say today that Watch Dogs is a game that focuses a lot on the impact of technology on our society. Like we all live into an hyper-connected world. It started with computers back in the days. Then afterwards we had mobile devices, and then we all ended up, or at least most of us, with smartphones. Then we asked ourselves, what would be the next step after that? And our answer was smart city. Which sounds futuristic, but it's not, actually. Rio de Janeiro is actually using that for the Olympics to manage their infrastructures, like traffic lights and stuff like that. What is really a smart city? It's a system that manages a city, like to optimize certain things and fix, like traffic jams, war against crime. A lot of cities have budget challenges, and at the same time, they need more police forces to deal with increasing crimes and stuff like that. CTOS would be the kind of systems and solutions to guarantee to citizens that your money is well spent and the resources are sent where it matters, those kinds of stuff. Now, the cool part is that in Watch Dogs, you're going to control that CTOS system, this little smart city system, so you can have a little bit more fun with the open world. So in the universe of Watch Dogs, CTOS has been the first place that has been successfully installed is in Chicago. Now, why did we pick Chicago? This is something that a lot of people are asking us. There's a lot of different answers to that question. The first one is the political setup of this place. Not everybody knows that, but Chicago is an extremely innovative place. They're renowned for their urbanism pretty much everywhere in the world. One of the reasons for it is that if you go at the Museum of Chicago, they define themselves based on their crisis. And they had quite a few, actually. They had Al Capone, they had a big fire that actually burnt everything down. They had to rebuild everything on top of it. But every time they had such a crisis, they invented something that changed the way they function. Like Al Capone's been stopped by new types of police force, which helped the police progress in the city. The big fire brought an unbelievable amount of architecture afterwards. It's one of the most varied that you can find in the United States, which was really cool for the artists who were really happy to build that. So that's one part of it. It makes sense to say that a city like that would have the balls to try something like CTOS first, to solve security and solve efficiency in their city. Another aspect of it is the density of the place. You've played many open city, I am sure. It's very hard to do, especially on the visual side. A lot of cities feel flat when you play them for some weird reason. The reason is quite simple. It's actually pretty chaotic in real life. So you need to build chaos. You cannot structure it too much. You need to have all the layers in. Chicago has certain districts and has complete second layers on the ground. So you have like an intersection, and under the road, there's another intersection. So for us, it was great. You could like act on both sides. You could like use it drawbridges with two different layers on top of it. So it forced us to challenge ourselves to build something dense that you would go inside of it, and then you would believe in that place. And last but not the least, it's a beautiful place to drive. There's a lot of underground tunnels and great curves and stuff like that to mess around with. But enough about Chicago. Like, the cool part isn't necessarily that you're going to be driving in Chicago, it's that you're going to control it. And that control is going to help you control, everything. Infrastructures, people around you, traffic lights, cameras, like L trains, all of that. And you'll get that to the hands of a man called Hayden Pierce. This man is a bit obsessed with surveillance. He's trying to protect his family from something that happened in the past. And unfortunately for him, his family will get endangered once again, and he will slowly be pushed to become one of those modern vigilante heroes. And now I need to precise something there. The word vigilante has a lot of different definitions for people, mainly because of comic books, actually. In the 70s, the comic books define or redefine that word to be like a guy with a cape and a mask that looks awesome and do everything. It's definitely part of what a vigilante is. But if you get in more recent history, a vigilante is also simply someone who takes justice into his own hands. And that is, if you go on the streets and you do that in real life, not necessarily going to end up like the best friend of the cops on the planet. So we took a very different route with what vigilante could mean in city. So if you would put like a spectrum, and you had Batman on one side and Dexter Morgan on the other, which, yes, is a vigilante as well. Then we're more kind of in the middle, maybe a bit towards Dexter a bit more than Batman. So we have a conflicted man. Aiden Pierce is not a good guy. He's not a bad guy. He's more inspired by the modern characters of television instead of the old school characters of television. What that means is old school 1980s was this guy is fundamentally good, and this guy's fundamentally bad, which is very hard to find in real life. Today's TV show is more like Breaking Bad. Conflicted mans. They do bad stuff, but you understand his motivations. They do good stuff. If you really sit back and ask yourself, who is the main character of Batman of Breaking Bad, he's one hell of a selfish prick when you think about it. But when you're watching the show, you really love the whole thing, and you want him to win anyway. And please don't spoil the end. I didn't see it already. So we've pushed this character visually as well. His personality, everything that is on him means something. Just the way he moves, for example. You might have noticed that when he takes his gun out, he puts it in his back like this, and he walks what we call concealed position. That was a first step in making sure that when you control the character, he feels aware of where he is, which is something that games don't do really well. We're only starting to get there. It's weird to see someone run like a robot regardless of the situation he's in. We're doing that because we're always scared to take control away from the country. But there's a way to do it otherwise. Aiden will just do that normally. If you start sprinting, he's going to start showing his gun, which gives you, as a player, the choice to take your gun out to prepare for the situation, but still be careful for nobody noticing that you have a gun. If someone notices you have a gun, they're going to call the cops, and you have to deal with that afterwards. Even the way he walks, which turned out to be generating a lot of discussions at E3-12, which is kind of funny. You wouldn't believe how many person asked me to remove that 1 minute and 20 seconds of walking at the beginning of the demo because it felt retarded. We ended up having an actually pretty good success with it. But the fact that he walks with the hand in his pocket and feels relaxed, the trench coat, means he can blend in, even though, if you really know clothing, he's one of the most fashion motherfucker I've ever seen. But still, for some reason, he looks awesome and he can fit in anyway. His coat is there for hiding stuff or giving that feeling. His mask has quite a few functions there to systemically get on when he's about to do something bad, basically when you take your gun out and that kind of stuff. That way, we'll at least have a metaphor to showcase that he's aware that there's cameras everywhere, those kinds of stuff. The hat is more inspired by Hollywood stars who always walk on the street fearing of having someone taking a picture from them, so they're always like that. And those two things together, when you put Aiden like this, draws a very specific line, hides his face, the way he holds his phone, all of those things has been thought through to make him, if I dare to say, hoping he would become a character. And when we started to see fan arts going on afterwards, it was pretty pleasing to see that pretty much all of those rules right off the bat were mastered by those people. Those kinds of details, we're putting them in every single one of our characters. It's just a way for us to give them more than what they are, and also starting to represent more than just the character, but also their connections and what they mean in our world. Like, for example, Clara Lyle is affiliated to the group called DeathSec, which unfortunately I still cannot talk about that much. But still, this symbol that we actually have in one of the T-shirts on the dev team, you might have seen it quite a few times, is one of the examples that she can wear in the game that incarnates DeathSec and tease it. Her belt, is a spy web, which talk about the internet, but also hacking, and the fact that she's a really dangerous trapdoor spider hacker that's very efficient. We have another guy who's more a I don't give a shit type of character. And that's pretty straightforward when you see the kind of little ASCII arts that we're putting on him and the pixel stuff. That's because he's kind of a genius. He can build pretty much any systems you can think of on a split of a second. But also, he kind of looks like a rock star. He was inspired by it. So it's kind of a nice fit. And in the end, we really want to push to make sure that those characters, and hopefully, which you'll discover from them in the game, will lead you to understand every little symbol they have on them, which we think is a nice detail. Talking about details, what's tricky is we are obsessed with details, but we're making a massive game, which means we have hundreds of people working on it. How the hell do you control the construction of such a precise game with hundreds of people? Well, you don't. It's impossible. So you basically create rules and standards to help other people make right choice, so you can actually trust them and have a nice environment at work. Believe it or not, it's very important when you make a game. So I'll go through those kind of pillars so you get a better got constructed. It starts with a very simple statement. Everything is about dynamism. If you're in an open world and you're about to give the player a sense of control on every systems around them, everything needs to be interconnected. You need to be immersed in everything you do. People need to look at you. It's all about the weather, the wind, how the infrastructures work, how the traffic system work, how people walk on the streets. Everything needs to be perfect because we're about to give you an incentive to look at every details from a gameplay standpoint, which is dangerous to an extent. So the living city needs to be heavily pushed. You need to see people talk to each other, being aware of each other, and aware of you as well, which we don't see enough in games so far. The reason why we need to do that is because afterwards we know you're going to spend a lot of time looking at them because we're asking you to from a gameplay standpoint. We really want to make sure that when you get into an area, they're bound to the environment. The guy who got splashed by the water there, for example, is a nice detail of what dynamism means. It's not just hacking a traffic light. It's also cars need to communicate with citizens like in real life. All of those elements are stuff that you tend to watch a lot in open world games. Afterwards, we're giving you the power to observe all of that, monitoring everybody, profiling every single individual. And that is all created dynamically for a very specific reason. We could have chose to handcraft everything, which would have been a terrible idea from a production standpoint, but still, we could have done that. The choice was to make something dynamic so we can let you fill the gap between what's there and what's not there, so you can have your own idea of what's going on, which I think is a big part of having fun in the game. And to push that to the next level, we give you all sorts of things to control your surrounding, whether it's shutting down communication or controlling traffic lights, up to the point where you saw at E3-212 that you can create systemic blackout in the entire city, which can become pretty handy if you want to prevent another player from hacking something, if they're invading your game, or if you want to prevent the cops around or the enemies to see you for a little bit, if you're at night. If you're doing that in the day, you're going to look ridiculous. All of that together has been crafted to communicate with each other for a very specific reason. So you can escalate to very action-packed situation. But it's not scripted situation. It's just never scripted situation. It's stuff that you're going to escalate based on the choice you've made. And there's nothing more gratifying than barely surviving a moment that you caused by making good choices and sometimes bad choices, by improvising in front of your enemies and the AI. That's really what Watch Dogs is all about in the end. It's not about controlling what you guys are going to do. It's about giving you a canvas where you can actually control it yourself. If you give control to the player, then you need to give them impact on what they do. So we really wanted to push the consequences to your actions. So there's a reputation system, and there's a bunch of different side effects that can happen when you make choices. And then you're going to have to deal with how you play afterwards and how the simulation will respond. Because in the end, I always ask the entire team to convey the level of drama and the seriousness of the situation every time you play one. And that drama is what's going to bring you to care about it, hopefully. If you don't, you can still shoot a lot of people and have fun. But if you're interested in that stuff, then there's a meaning to it. And that's why everything is connected. Then afterwards, I said that a few times. If everything is connected, then we needed to say that everyone was connected to. So it was obvious since the beginning that we needed to have multiplayer that embraces that concept. Other players showing up in your game, and even more. But that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. So all of this connectivity, this control that leads to unbelievable dynamism that you're going to have to be able to control in the right way, we need to make you work to get it. If we're selling this fantasy of monitoring an entire city, and you're not going tangibly in the world to craft your own system, we're kind of lying. We're not really selling you that fantasy. So you're going to have to go into free roaming. When you start the game, the open world is pretty much accessible from start. And you can go into free roam when you want. And when you do that, you can go into those central operating system seamlessly and just like unlock them based on a challenge that they're going to offer to you. Once you unlock them, it gives you the ability to monitor this area, which is an entire district. You can also go even deeper in that hacking to unlock all of the free roaming in the area. And that is done through a little object that we've put in the world. It looks a bit, it sounds simple to put CTOS in the city, but it's pretty hard to do it without having it look ridiculous. So we had to really base ourselves on real objects, real technology, because in the end it's pretty possible to do that technology right away in the game. But we didn't want it to insult your intelligence, so you ended up playing the game and it felt like a mishmash of today's Chicago and a sci-fi like Mass Effect thing. I love Mass Effect. It's just that it's not our game. That was for, let's say, the canvas to try to make decisions at the higher level of what Watch Dogs should be. Now let's talk about gameplay, because that needs specific pillars as well. We're talking a lot about hacking. It's definitely one part of it, but there's also driving, on foot, parkour if you want, and combat. Watch Dogs is kind of the, let's say, a combination of know-how of Ubisoft past projects. I don't think it could have pulled off any pitch remotely like Watch Dogs in another studio. You need to have people who've done Splinter Cell third-person shooters. You need to have people who've done driving before. You need to have people who've done navigations before. Why? Because we need those to feel as good as a game that would dedicate its entire gameplay to it. And we've really pushed a lot in those 5 years to make sure each of those gameplay feels right. But what really makes it different is not each of those gameplay separately. It's how we bound them to each other. You can layer all of those things to express yourself at any point in time. That's why we created the focus. So for those who thought that this slow motion was pretty much like a bullet time, it is. It's just slow motion. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel on that one. But it's been created to help players think in a split of a second. You know that scene in the first Bourne movie where the guy is in the restaurant and he tells the girl, like, I don't know why, but I know this guy's a lefty, and there's like 2 windows. And this entire scene is there just to say to the audience, I'm a badass, awesome guy. And then afterwards, everything I'm going to do is going to be based on that statement. In a game, we want to make sure you feel like that guy, the smart city guy, like the guy who has a street smart quality to it. So mechanically, you can combine running after someone and hacking him, driving at 200 miles per hour and taking down someone with hacking. That's why hacking is simple, pressing a button, because when you'll play the game, you'll see that knowing how to use it against like 6 cars at once while driving at 200 miles is pretty difficult, or just enough difficult, not too hard. That's for the gameplay. There's another layer to it that I want to talk about, which is a pain in the ass to build, to be quite frank. It's the subtle gameplays. It's something I've never really seen in games before, and it's something that I think that more and more we'll see in games. In Watch Dogs, you can pretty much stand still and play the game for 20 minutes, which is a bit crazy when you think about it. But you can just wander around, stop, and start profiling everybody. Listen to phone calls, get rewards, progressing. Stumble upon a guy that you need to tail to see if you're going to have to intervene in something. And then the next thing you know, you went from standstill to foot chase, to car chase, to the motherfucker calling his friends, and now it's like escalating into one of those unbelievable situations. That kind of thing was very important to us, to bring density in the open world, which is still something that's lacking. Sometimes we push a lot with scale, which is awesome, but sometimes you end up with scale being nothing less than space between A to B. So we wanted to shrink A to B and making sure that there's a lot to do between the two. Another example of that is if you do those kind of events and intervening in situations and all of that, it's going to affect your reputation. That reputation is part of the elements that defines the media broadcast system. So you can end up showing up in a shop or anywhere else, and then your face pops up on the phones of citizens or on televisions, and now they're going to go and call the cops, and you need to deal with it. But dealing with it in our game is just not... I mean, you could have shot that guy in the face. That would have worked. Definitely worked. But 200 or 300 guys might have looked at it, and now there's 2 guys calling the cops. And now maybe there's 4 guys calling the cops. Now if you don't have jam communication tools to prevent everybody to call the cops at once, you're going to get in trouble anyway. So you need to be able to go subtly on it as well. So you can aim your gun and scare someone, and he's gonna back off. You can break his phone out. There's a lot of different ways of approaching those situations to help players express themselves differently. The same goes with what we've shown at last E3, the stealth driving thing, right? By the way, that's not a mission. That's just a system. Like when the cop shows up in Watch Dogs, it starts with a scan. Like you get scanned by the CTOS to confirm your location. If you pull off that challenge, the cop will never show. If they located you, they send the cops. If you break line of sight, it turns into that stuff right away and systemically way. So that way it's more believable. Like it gives you an extra way of getting out of the cops. Yes, you can take them down and exit the area, but you can also hide inside of it and survive without getting detected, and eventually they're going to abandon and go away. You can even stand still as a strategy against the cop. So that doesn't happen often, though. Like, if you start being violent against them, they're going to respond accordingly. But if cop shows up and you didn't do anything wrong yet, then they need to approach you in a logical way. And that gives you extra time to do stuff like we did at E3, like waiting a little bit, seeing an escape route, like using slow-mo, like popping a blackout or doing a bunch of other stuff, and then moving around. There's a reason why we shoot in the knee, by the way. Like, killing cops is pretty dangerous in the game. You can do it. It's going to climb up the EAT system, which is the bar in the bottom, and the next time they'll show up, it's going to be a big deal. Creating subtlety, like I said earlier, is a nightmare. And I'm sorry for all the programmers who had to work on it, and they're really amazing and talented people. They built a new engine that we call Disrupt Engine, where we pushed it a little bit more for the next gen as well. We didn't want, and that's partially my fault, you can judge whether or not I was right, we didn't want to cannibalize what Watch Dogs is supposed to be because there's a new machines coming out. So we didn't start going crazy with features and stuff like that. But we did want to use the machine for simulation and pushing forward. So talking about subtlety, we started thinking about simulating the invisible, which kind of sounds stupid when you say it that way, but the wind system, which sounds, you know, like your details, but the first time you live into a world in a game where you can feel the real atmosphere, current, where the trees, the particle that you cause from an explosion, the clothing of Aiden and as well as everybody else, their airs, like everything move according to something that makes sense. The reason why it makes a difference is because your brain is so used to it. When you're outside, that you see the wind, you know how it works. So when you're basically in the game, suddenly it's more immersive. Even the cars are generating winds and stuff like that. And that makes it possible for us to generate particle effects and stuff like that. That makes it very cool when you're in the game. And we didn't stop there. Like, we started tying that wind to the water system. So if there's a better weather or a bad weather, it's going to change a bit how the water responds, like how your boat goes into it, the waves, all that dynamic stuff. Even though it's an open world game, you need to have those little details. All of that supports the idea of everything is connected. When you think about it, hacking is nothing more than an emulation of what the nature does. Everything speaks to each other, and that's why it works so well, I guess. So I said it earlier on. The connectivity brought us to also talk about how everybody is connected together. So that's why we've built the seamless online system. That thing has been fascinating. Being able to wander around in a single player, and then suddenly someone shows up and he's hacking you and you need to find him. And once you find him, you can decide what you want to do with him. Kill him, let him go. He's going to certainly try to kill you and get out. I have to say, there's really tangible emotion when someone shows up in your game, hacks you and leave without dying. You really want to kill him back afterwards. So by doing that, you're able to go in what we call the grid, which is part of what you construct when you do the free roaming and create your own monitoring network. And you can find that motherfucker. And if he's online, you can go in his game, and he doesn't know you're there. You arrive, and he's doing his shit, and you can do something really cool with him. So that emotion is extremely powerful. It can sound scary sometimes, like some people have been asking a lot about griefing and stuff like that. It's a dynamic system, so I reassure you right away. When you hack someone else, it unlocks your firewall, which means you're available to get invaded. If you get invaded once, firewall is back on. And we're tracking the way you play, which means that if you like that a lot, we might scale down a bit the firewall, but if you don't like it at all, we're going to scale it up. And if you want to put it off, you can. But if you do that, then you're missing on a pretty cool experience. But it's still your choice. But it doesn't stop there. Like, if you're making a game about hyperconnectivity, where pretty much like you end up like sitting down, playing a game with a controller, but on the table aside there's a phone. And when you stop playing, you grab your phone and you leave and you're still connected. If we're not considering that, we're not doing what Watch Dogs is supposed to be doing. That's why we made the free app like CTOS mobile thing, so that anybody who wants to grab that app and join in, they can. They don't need to have Watch Dogs or anything like that. And it had to be in real time. I'm not a big fan of companion apps, I have to say, because it's not tangible gameplay. So we had to build something that would be tangible gameplay. So when you take that app, you're controlling the chopper, you are dispatching the cops in a strategic way, in real time, and you control the entire city. So you can hack everything around him, you can put mines everywhere, like so that the player have a hard time getting out of there. So if you challenge a player, he needs to accept on that one. We're not going to let some players randomly arrive with those kind of powers in your game. But if you accept, then you end up in this very unique experience, which is a lot more powerful, because when you do what you want to do is give variety of experiences. So it's like adding another free roaming activity. But this one can only be created if you have these two perspectives put together. So to sum up everything, Watch Dogs is about hyperconnectivity. That's not something that's new. It's all about controlling what's around you. And you're going to progressively get those powers with skill points and an RPG kind of system. The more you're using those things, the better you're going to get. You can also monitor everybody around you. And all of that has been built so that you can really build your own action moments. It's not just there as separate elements. And that's a big part of the key for Watch Dogs. Is a lot of people have been asking me stuff like, what distinguishes Watch Dogs from other games? What's the unique thing? Everybody can answer their key features to that question and kind of bullshit in the end. The reason why something is new is quite different, actually. Let's think about chess, just to give you an example. When you look at a child playing chess and never played chess in his life, you look at the board, he doesn't know what the hell is going on, and he's bored. He makes stupid moves, and then he died, and it looks like the worst game on the planet. The same board, when you understand all the possibilities, suddenly the same board is interesting, because you're thinking about all the strategies and the other stuff that the other player will do. It's the same when you play a video game. It's just that the hardcore part of it is that it's a loop of 1 or 2 seconds instead of being a lot slower. So when you're playing Watch Dogs, it had to be possible for you to act all the time, regardless of what you're doing, on top of it. Because that way you can consider, every 2 seconds, something you never considered before in a game. A traffic light, a steam pipe, like profiling someone, fleeing, hiding from the cops, using blackouts. All of those possibilities, if you are able, as a good player, to start to progressively put them in your arsenal, then you can put the controller down and say, Jesus, that felt fresh and different. That's why it needed to be possible all the time. That's why people need to get into your game sometimes. You always need to have a reminder of the thematics and the fantasy in a way that you never experienced it before. If you only put that in a vacuum for 1 or 2 seconds or certain missions, you're not going to feel like it's fresh all the time. And suddenly we're failing. So hopefully when you're going to get the controller very soon, you're going to feel that difference and you're going to be happy about what we've created. Or at least as happy as we had the fun to building it for 5 years. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Jonathan. I don't say this lightly, but that's some of the best water I've seen at the Expo, so congratulations for that, and thank you for everything else. We don't have time for questions, unfortunately, and so we're going to wrap it up there. Batman's in here next. If you want to come to that, you're going to have to go out and queue back up to come back in. So hopefully we'll see you all here a bit later. Thank you.